to Middle East commentator Chris Doyle, live from London. Chris, Netanyahu under so much pressure, both internationally and from the families of the hostages, as we've been hearing, in particular following yesterday's news that a fifth have died. Are you surprised that today he's remained yet again so steadfast?
This is typical of Netanyahu, who never likes in public to be seen to be taking a backward step. He is always full of confidence. He never gives over any sense that he has any doubt in his position. And he is under pressure, but he has been really ever since the atrocities of October the 7th. He has been largely blamed by the Israeli public. There's a lot of opposition. The polls are very low for him. And this really hasn't changed in all those months since. But for him, perhaps the biggest pressure, and I think this is one of the criticisms of him, is his own pressure. That is, that he doesn't want the war to end because he wants to stay in office, he wants to survive. And if he leaves office, if he does get kicked out, he will face trial and possible jail time. So he actually has every personal motivation to keep the crisis going. And I think there's quite a few people who believe that he is rejecting any potential deal on the hostages, any potential ceasefire bid, precisely because of that. He just does not want to see the end of this particular crisis. He also needs to present it to a very skeptical Israeli public that he gets total victory. He has to demonstrate that after all this loss in Israel, that somehow he can achieve the total destruction of Hamas, which of course is an impossibility. It's a ridiculous war aim. But at a slightly more realistic end, can he manage to ensure that Hamas is no longer in power in Gaza? Can he get some of those hostages back? Possibly. Does he avoid an escalation with Hezbollah, or does he try to move to the West Bank and really foment a crisis there, which many of his coalition members would love? So, Netanyahu is not in the mood to listen to the Americans trying to apply pressure, trying to tell him that he has to sign up to a ceasefire deal, to have to let in more humanitarian aid. And he also believes that his base, the people who might still support him, will like to see him standing up to the world's major power, the United States, their major ally, that this somehow makes him look strong as opposed to weak.
And Chris, these negotiations, these ongoing negotiations, they're being brokered indirectly to an extent. Is the problem here that there's no trust between Netanyahu nor Hamas?
Well, there's definitely never been any trust between, the two sides. It's not just that Hamas doesn't trust Netanyahu, wouldn't trust anyone within the Israeli government, and very much vice versa. I think that both parties will calculate according to their own interests. Hamas, likewise, will want to be able to demonstrate to its own base, to Palestinians and to the wider region, that its actions on the 7th of October, those violent atrocities, have brought about some benefits, like mass release of Palestinian prisoners in jails, the release of all female prisoners, for example. I mean, after all the horrific levels of destruction, loss of life, Hamas has to answer to its own public, its own fellow Palestinians. Was this all worth it? So Hamas has a definite need to get something out of this. Conversely, of course, Netanyahu does not wish to be seen to be giving in to Hamas or rewarding Hamas. And I think that this is a huge problem, and why it's very difficult to get the two parties to agree on anything. They probably have to be coerced into it. It's not going to be an agreement that they're going to enjoy one bit. But there is also the very distinct possibility that we don't get to a ceasefire agreement. There is the possibility that Israel will continue its attacks into Rafah, where now 1 million Palestinians are hemmed into. Rafah's population used to be about 200,000, and that they will effectively bring about the end of Hamas's major military capabilities and begin to decrease and lessen the military footprint within Gaza. And therefore, a ceasefire or an end of fighting won't be coming about, but there may be a drop down in Israeli military operations. And at that stage, they can allow more aid in and try to decrease the international pressure on Israel.
Chris, thank you very much. We'll return to you once we've heard from Blinken a bit later on. Chris Doyle speaking to us live from London there.